There's some good news coming from this highly conservative Supreme Court, where they just declined to hear a case involving a transgender student who had sued to use the school bathroom that he identified with. Now, that means that since the Supreme Court refused to hear this case, they are allowing the lower court's ruling on the case to stand. And the lower court's ruling was great. So the case concerns the scope of Title IX that prohibits schools from discriminating on the basis of sex. It began when Gavin Grimm, that's the name of the student, a transgender male, who was then in high school, challenged the local school board's decision to require him to use either a unisex restroom or a restroom that corresponds to the sex female he was assigned at birth. Now, the court's decision to not review an opinion by the Fourth US Court or Circuit Court of Appeals means the public school students in the mid-Atlantic states covered by the Fourth Circuit, as well as states governed by the Seventh Circuit and the 11th Circuit, can use the bathroom that corresponds to their gender identity. So the issue, unfortunately, is unsettled in other states that are represented by other courts, and there is some likelihood that conservatives will try to bring this case back up and try to get it to the Supreme Court. But I do think that this is good news in that it sets a precedent indicating that this, again, very conservative Supreme Court doesn't want to hear these cases, or more importantly, challenge what the lower court has ruled in regard to the transgender bathroom issue. But when you look at a lot of the social issues that have made their way to the Supreme Court, this conservative court has not been awful, right? And I think that a lot of the fear mongering that we've heard from the Democratic Party and the corporate media has focused primarily on the social issues, when in reality, maybe we should have focused a little more on corporate issues, because the pro-corporate rulings of the Supreme Court have been brutal, including their willingness to support child slavery by American corporations. And that's why the Supreme Court gets no cookies. No cookies for you, I'm sorry. So I'll give you details on that child slavery ruling in just a minute. But Cenk, I know you're itching to jump in.
I am. Look, I love the point you're about to make on what Supreme Court cares about and doesn't care about. So let me, before we get into how they have helped corporations in a grotesque way, let me just say, look, we are thrilled with the ruling, or the fact that they didn't pick up the case and hence confirm the lower court's ruling on this issue of transgender bathrooms.
Definitely.
And so, but now I'm gonna make an ironic comment. Republicans, the voters, you're in the same situation as progressive voters, okay? Your politicians lie to you all the time. Oh, we're gonna get the transgender people, you hate them, we hate them, oh my God, we're gonna get them, right? And we gotta get the justices, and the justices will make the decisions, et cetera, and we'll win on all the social justice issues based on the Supreme Court. But you never do, because they don't really care about that. All they care about, including the Supreme Court justices, the money.
That's why they were put there, guys. Look, these social issues are important. I don't want to take away from that. And we do have a significant portion of the population in this country that want to discriminate, that hate the LGBTQ community, hate the fact that equality should exist in a democratic country, should exist, period. But all of these conservative organizations that are funded by moneyed interests, right, don't care about the social issues at all. What they want more than anything is to ensure that they can install justices that crush workers, including workers abroad, including children abroad, that are forced into the cocoa trade by companies like Nestle and Cargill. I'll give you the details again in just a minute, but Cenk, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay. Just to finish the thought, guys, that social issues is the carrot that they dangle right in front of us for both the right wing and the left wing. Now, for you right wingers, I'm not on your side on social issues at all. I want to defeat you really badly, okay? But do you ever get what you want? Because we never get what we want. And like, oh, come a little further, and then you'll get it. I mean, agree to all of this corporate hegemony and give the corporate machines everything they want, and then we'll give you what you want. Well, us on the left, we never get it. You on the right, you never get it. Because it isn't about the social issues. The social issues is a trick to get you to agree to the corporate robbery that they are doing for all of us.
Yep.
We need to wake up and look, let's save democracy. The way you do it is getting money out of politics. And then once you do that, then let's go back to a fight on social issues and see who wins. Right? You think most of the country's on your side, we think that most of the country's on our side. I'd love to engage in that debate in an actual democracy rather than the sham we have now.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the corporate giveaways that were just handed down by the Supreme Court. I'll start with the most egregious example. So there is a group of people who are trying to sue Nestle and Cargill. Both of those companies have engaged in basically exploiting labor in African countries, specifically the Ivory Coast. And children, literal children, have been forced into slavery in order to do the trading, the harvesting of the cocoa beans, which Nestle and Cargill both use for their products. Now keep in mind that these are two companies that are based here in the United States. Financial decisions are made here in the United States, which is why these 6 individuals wanted to sue these two companies in the United States. The Supreme Court has decided, no, you don't have the right to sue. Okay, so the 6 men who sued claimed that those companies aided and abetted child slavery because they, quote, knew or should have known that the farms were using enslaved children. Now, while neither company owns or operates the farms in the Ivory Coast, by the way, the children are also trafficked to the Ivory Coast for this purpose. They had bought cocoa beans from them and also provided the farms with technical and financial resources in exchange for exclusive rights to their crops. So again, it seems like they knew quite a bit and were happy to exploit the cheap labor there. Now, Justice Clarence Thomas, writing for the 8-1 majority, meaning it wasn't just conservative justices here. Liberal justices also voted along with the conservatives here. 8-1 majority said that the US Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit erred in allowing the suit on the grounds that Nestle and Cargill had allegedly made, quote, major operational decisions, end quote, in the United States. Thomas said the 6 plaintiffs, who are from the nation of Mali, improperly sought to sue under the Alien Tort Statute for conduct that occurred outside of the United States. So this argument is ridiculous, and what they're arguing, the justices who voted the way that they did, is, well, the child slavery didn't happen in the United States. The child slavery happened in the Ivory Coast, and so Nestle isn't responsible. Yeah, but Nestle is a US-based company, and there needs to be justice. If these 6 individuals can't sue Nestle, which is based in the United States, then where exactly are they supposed to go to get justice? That's the question.
Yeah, okay, so there's a number of issues here. So first, on this child slavery issue, look, are there real legal issues at hand? Yes. So let me break it down real quick. You have to see, hey, did they actually do it? Did they know about the child slavery or didn't they? But the Supreme Court never got to that question because they said, we don't care. We just want to know, is it involved the Alien Tort Statute or not? And in order to determine that, we have to see if it is materially affected by something that happens in the United States, okay? And that's a fair question because if there's a business in the Ivory Coast and they're just a local business, the US has nothing to do with it. So suing in the United States Supreme Court about something that the Ivory Coast business is doing doesn't make any sense. So I get that, right? So then let's go to the heart of the issue. Nestle, Cargill, et cetera. No matter where they technically got started or are based, whether they're in Europe or America, do they make decisions here in the United States? And the answer to that is actually super obvious and pretty much conceded in the court cases. Yes, they make financial decisions here. Well, now, if you say financial decisions don't count and only the decisions made in each individual country counts, well, that makes no sense at all. All decisions are financial. Yeah, they're doing the child slavery so they can make more money, okay? Nestle didn't go and move their headquarters to Ivory Coast so they could make a decision there. This doesn't just affect the Ivory Coast. It's not localized to that country. They're making decisions that affect the whole planet. The idea that these corporations are based anywhere, or an American company or a European company or a Japanese company is absurd. They're multinational corporations, and their decisions, the financial decisions they make in boardrooms in the United States affects the whole planet. Any reasonable person, all of you watching right now, whether you're left wing, right wing, or independent, you all agree with me because that's obvious, right? But the Supreme Court looks at it, and remember, Clinton and Obama bragged every time they put somebody on the Supreme Court, they are very business friendly. Don't worry, they're very business friendly. Yeah. No, that's what I'm worried about. Look, businesses are important and vital, and we have a business, right? But them running the government, running the Supreme Court, running all of our politicians, and then allowing themselves to do child slavery is deeply problematic. And that's exactly why these justices were picked. And the two that he picked, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, 2 out of the 3, they both had cases where they literally allowed corporations to kill people with no consequences. That's why they were picked. That wasn't a bug, that was a feature. Those guys, one was a SeaWorld case where a guy got eaten by a killer whale, and Kavanaugh was like, who cares? No liability, right?
Insane, absolutely insane. The trucker.
Gorsuch case is the trucker case. Trucker's freezing to death. The corporation orders him to stay on the road. He's already got frostbite, he's gonna die. They ordered him to stay, he didn't stay, and Gorsuch said, yeah, of course you should be fired. You should have sat there and froze to death. Now, when you see vicious decisions like that, you think monster. And if you're a right winger and you're pro-life, you would think monster, right? But everybody in power, both Democrats and Republicans, look at that and go, that's my boy, that's my boy. You're willing to let corporations kill or do slavery? Right ahead, you're on the Supreme Court. That's your best qualification to get on the Supreme Court.
And the other ruling recently undid the progress made by Cesar Chavez in California. So look, I mean, the second ruling is actually logical, is far more logical than the ruling I told you about regarding child slavery. Because when you live in a country where private property is considered more important than actual human lives, then this is the way that they vote. So Cesar Chavez, as we know, fought hard to ensure that farmers had actual working conditions that weren't brutal and devastating, and also made it easier for organizers to go onto farms and to help farmers unionize, right? Organize. And so this latest Supreme Court ruling in regard to organizing efforts on these private farms basically indicates that no, organizers cannot go onto this private property because it violates the private property of the owners of the farms. And so just to go back a little bit and give you more context, there was a state regulation issued in 1975 and unique in the nation. It allowed union organizers to meet with agricultural workers at work sites in the hour before and after work and during lunch breaks for as many as 120 days a year. Now, the conservative justices didn't like that and they voted against it, basically striking down that rule from 1975. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, said that the access regulation grants labor organizations a right to invade the grower's property. That meant, he wrote, that it was a taking of private property without just compensation. I don't see how that's taking of private property, but that's, I mean, they'll say whatever they need to say to protect the property owners. That's what this is really about.
So let me explain that one real quick. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Dolores Huerta, who was critical, along with Cesar Chavez, in getting rights to those farm workers. One of my proudest moments when I had my kids meet her. She's a living legend. So now, in terms of the essence of this case, guys, there's 2 kinds of takings, and it's really not that complicated. When the government takes something in regulating a business, sometimes they have to enter the premises, for example, do inspections. The example I often give is elevator inspections, right? They're either regulatory takings or per se takings. Per se taking is much more serious, and they might be able to block you from coming onto their property if it gets classified as that. Regulatory is normal. Hey, I got to go on there to make sure that the meat is not rotten. Okay, that's a regular. In this case, John Roberts moved the union organizing into a per se taking, meaning no, it can be absolutely blocked, or you have to give tremendous amount of money to the company to be able to justify it. But it's actually even more dangerous than that, because it might apply to all regulations.
Yep.
in which case it would annihilate every regulation we have in the country. No, you're not allowed to inspect my meat. You're not allowed to inspect my hospital. You're not allowed to inspect anything because it's a per se taking. Oh my God, then we would have no regulations left. Then corporations win on everything. They can do anything they want and they won't be subject to inspections, laws, regulations, or anything. This Supreme Court is totally out of control. Every once in a while, John Roberts will again betray the right wing on a social justice issue, right? And then he'll turn around and go, oh yeah, any regulation of corporations is illegal. Did anybody notice? Did anybody notice? No, the corporate media loved it and called me bipartisan and a fair guy, and I'm the sweetest, loveliest guy there is. I just let corporations rob you guys blind for the rest of time. That's who John Roberts is. That's who this Supreme Court is. And look, I'm gonna say one last thing about all these international corporations. When it's convenient for them, they're international. Hey, I'm gonna do a tax loophole called a double Irish or the Dutch sandwich, okay? Oh, my headquarters is in the Cayman Islands. I don't know what you're talking about, right? I'm an international company. Oh, okay, good. If you're an international company, then I'm gonna deny you any US contracts. The government contracts are for US companies. No, I'm a US company. Okay, then I'm gonna hold you responsible for the child labor that you're doing based out of the actions you took in America. No, I'm not a US company. Make up your mind, which one is it? And the reality is, if we had a government that was actually a democracy, they would hold those corporations accountable on our behalf to protect us. And again, right wing, you don't like child trafficking, right? Nobody does, right? And here they go, no, as long as it's a corporation, we'll let them do whatever they want and we'll let them run amok. This whole thing is a highway robbery orchestrated by corrupt Republicans and Democrats and oftentimes the corrupt corporate media to let corporations get anything they want. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.